Peace, peace, peace. I am Phillip Roundtree, and you are tuned into the February 3rd edition of Rhetorically Speaking. Shout out to those of you who are watching on Facebook Live. Props to those who are tuned in on YouTube Live. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. And last but not least, props to those who are tuning in on the IG Live. Listen, I don't know what was happening with that flickery filter yesterday. That's why I'm a few minutes late today. I tried to go live on IG again, and that same flickering purple and blue and green light was going off. It had me thinking like I was in a disco or something somewhere, but I somehow got it fixed. So props to y'all for tuning in. As always, make sure you go over to YouTube. It's a better viewing experience if I do say so myself. So listen, we got a dope show on tap. Oh, in my introductions, right? I want to say I don't want to give a shout out to Ben Simmons who is playing right now. For those of you who know, you know I've been extremely critical of Ben Simmons the last few years, just because it's hard to watch somebody with so much talent for whatever reason, not maximize that talent. And I think it's the luxury that we're able to take as fans because we're not the ones doing the work, and we can. And that goes into our everyday life too, right? Where somebody's critical of you, they might critique you, tell you to do something better, and it's just like you have no idea what's taking place. But that's just where I am right now. The game is on. That's the reason why I brought up Ben Simmons. And also, I don't want to give a shout out to the school district of Philadelphia. So I wasn't going to have this conversation. See, they go to life flickering. Yeah, I think it might be a spirit in here. I might need one of those shows on Discovery Plus, the ID network or something. So again, go on over to YouTube at Phil MSW so you don't have to see that flickering light. And so the reason I'm not giving a shout out to the school district of Philadelphia is because of not only are there it's almost the end of the school year and they're still trying to have students, they already have teachers in the buildings, but they're trying to have students, at least the lower grade students, go back to school. They say that students are falling behind. Lo and behold, a article comes out talking about the statistics of and offering the statistic 33% of Philadelphia third graders are illiterate. 33% are illiterate. And so my question is, what exactly are we rushing to get kids back into school for? Do we not want that number to increase? Because anybody with some knowledge of statistics, they're going to tell you, well, if it's 33%, it's probably a lot higher than that, right? 33% is a little more palatable as opposed to, say, 50%. And we're talking about just illiterate. We're not even talking about functionally literate, where they can read a few words. And so that's another reason why I'm not shouting them out. But the main reason I'm not shouting them out is because of their approach to the pandemic. They had to be forced not to reopen. Right? They had to be forced not to reopen because if it was up to William Hite and his cronies, everybody would be back in school right now, again, in the midst of a pandemic where people continue to die. I know there are statistics out there that say, well, the lower grade students are at less risk. But there's also statistics out there that say it's the asymptomatic individuals, children, adults, who are passing it along, this here COVID 19. And so it's kind of irresponsible to say, hey, we need to get back to business as usual under the faulty premise and faulty logic that students are falling behind. Because if you asked anybody who's had any dealings with the Philadelphia school district, including myself, they've always been behind. Except in your shishi foo schools like your Centrals, your Girls Highs, your Bodines. I went to Germantown Lincoln on motivation. And in 10th, 11th grade, it was either 10th or 11th grade, I had an English teacher who literally could not read. But this was taking place inside schools in the Philadelphia school district. And so the picture I'm about to show is how they plan to ventilate dilapidated schools, which the majority of school district schools are dilapidated. This is the same schools in school district that had an asbestos problem and still allowed children to go into the school. It wasn't until white folk and their children at Ben Franklin High School that ended up being merged with whatever schools, right? Where they said, hey, yeah, maybe they shouldn't come into this building. But it's okay for the impoverished. It's okay for the disenfranchised and the marginalized. It's cool for them. The asbestos problem is no different than the Flint water crisis. It's just like, hey, we see it's a problem. Yeah, we might do some patchwork. But yeah, overall, no, we're not shutting the studio down like Puff did in Making the Band when Ness and them started wilding. But take a look at this picture. What you see are Dollar General fans hammered in to some cardboard. Cardboard, it's not cardboard, it's actually wood. So it's carved into a board. Dollar General window fans with some Lowe's or Home Depot wood surrounding it. And this is what they plan to use to ventilate classrooms that have poor ventilation. This is what they're proposing to our children. This is what our teachers, the type of conditions they have to work in. And so when I saw the picture initially a few weeks ago, I thought it was a joke. Nah, we talk about, even though I know how the school district gives it up, nah, this can't be. This is something that I would create to avoid turning the AC on. Not something that I will put in schools to improve ventilation. And so I ignored it for a few days. And then I saw it again. And I saw it in an article from WHYY. And then I saw the school district of Philadelphia justify, because you want to double down on the bull job. See, I'm doing better in 2021. I'm not cussing as much. My mama might be watching. See, what you all, and I'm being honest, what you always want to do is, if you in the wrong, you always want to double down on being in the wrong. Not really. But hey, if you're going to go all in, go all in. And that's exactly what the school district did. They went all in. I saw a release on Facebook today that said, and it's on the school district's website, their goal is to keep the temperature at a steady 68 degrees. We talking about this the dead of winter. Right? I'm looking outside. I had to actually go out and shovel yesterday. And it's not like I'm against shoveling. But it's a certain mindset you have to go out and shovel. And it's one that I haven't had to have in a few years. Because you got to be really ready to brave the cold. Got to make sure you garbed up. You got your hat. Make sure you got your gloves on. But that's for me to shovel out my car, not for me to sit and learn my ABCs, my 1, 2, 3s, in a classroom for 8 hours a day. And so my question is, how do you plan on regulating the temperature with these fans? Because clearly you have to have windows open. And my thinking is, if you already have poor ventilation in there, that means your systems, your heating system, your cooling system might be a little old. We know these systems within these dilapidated buildings are antiquated. Don't ask me why it's not enough funding to make this happen. My taxes go up every damn year. You would think I live in the suburbs. Amongst the black folk who wanted to get away from the black folk. That's a different story. But you would think I live in the suburbs as much taxes as I pay. But we know we got to make sure we paying the police the overtime so when they are jacking people up at protests and stealing babies out of cars and beating up the driver who happens to be a woman, we got to make sure that they're duly compensated. I want to give the school district the benefit of the doubt. And so I started looking, right? Because I try to do research, right? That's what I'm in school. I'm doing research. And so the first question I saw was, are window fans a useful tool? And researchers say, environmental engineers say, yes, you know what? They're pushing fresh air around the room, which is the job of ventilation. So yes, it's a very legitimate strategy. Kudos, School District of Philadelphia. Your Dollar General project setup, no shade to those from the projects. It is a viable strategy. Another question, could window fans cause other problems? And the answer is yes. The air is going to be washing from one side of the room to another. And so if somebody's in front of the fan, and you know how it is when you go to sleep with that fan on, you wake up with the thinking you done caught the flu. And mind you, we're adults doing this. We talking about kids. We're talking about children. This is the level of respect, the level of ingenuity, the resourcefulness that they have when it comes to kids in the community. Another question was, does the district's approach to ventilation make sense? And the response was, here's where things get a little complicated. Whenever somebody says, it's a little complicated, we know the answer to that already. Right? We know the answer to that already. And so I'm not going to go there. Does it work? Yeah, it works. Is it recommended? Probably not. Given the population that you're dealing with, given what you're asking them to do. The importance of a learning environment being conducive to learning, which means temperature. Not having the sounds of the Dollar General fans blowing in the background, impacting your ability to concentrate. And so they missed the mark. But of course, they doubled down on it. I haven't seen anything from the school board with regards to this. A school board that I applied to be on, but they didn't choose me. It's probably for the best. Because you're not going to catch me out here trying to sell this to people. And I don't have a filter. What in the peanut butter and jelly bull job is this? Somebody explain to me what's happening here. Okay, I understand why scientifically this makes sense. But what about the optics? Because optics matter too. What about the legitimacy of concerns? What about the parents who say, listen, I don't want, I'm not opposed to my child going back, but yeah, I don't necessarily want these in the school. What accommodations will be made for these parents? And see, so often, and this is why I hate bureaucracies, because decision making operates in a silo. Is height is his select group of people. It's not the community. It's not the community. This isn't a mutually beneficial relationship. It's one that's built off reciprocity. You know, you have the decision makers, and then you have those who are supposed to accept the decisions being made. And so my hope is that somebody still got the receipts for these Dollar General fans. And they say, you know what, this isn't a good idea. Let's ride the school year out. Because again, if we're so concerned about literacy, what's going to take place in the next 3 months, 4 months, to really improve that? Because we know that many teachers within the school district of Philadelphia are teaching to the exam. It's not necessarily about educating. Now, don't get me wrong. It's a lot of people out there doing amazing things. But if we're being honest, if we're being transparent, what's going to truly change? I don't see it. I don't see it. This isn't 33% of third graders not being able to read isn't something that happened because of COVID. We're talking about some deep rooted systemic issues. We're talking about the intersection of poverty, racism, prejudice, incompetence, and so on and so on. It makes you question, is this model even the appropriate model? And I'm not necessarily talking about the way that we're educating, but who's in control, who the decision makers are. Even when we talk about a school board with 7, 8 people representing hundreds of thousands of the interest of hundreds of thousands of families, of kids. And still having to have a relationship with these officials. Again, that's just my gripes with not only the school district, but bureaucracy. But look at those fans. I don't get it. I don't get it. I wonder how much they cost. Right? I wonder how much they cost. And who's pocketing the rest? But we do know your man Height got a couple mil few years back. But I digress, man. On to this next topic. I ain't trying to be here long because, as I said, the Six is on. So some good news that came out of the November election is that Oregon decriminalizes all drugs. If I had a round of applause, I would give it to the people of Oregon. You know, I'm not one to advocate for voting. However, this is one of those instances where they can show Phil and be like, Phil, listen, people voted for this, and I can say, I can't argue with you. I can't argue with you. And so, give me a second as I pull this up. So, Oregon has become the first state to decriminalize possession of drugs. So, police in Oregon can no longer arrest someone for possession of small amounts of heroin, methamphetamine, LSD, oxycodone, and other drugs. I'm sorry. When I hear that, I hear police in Oregon can no longer arrest white people. Is it just me? Am I the only one that hears that? Police in Oregon can no longer arrest someone for possession of small amounts of heroin, or as we call it in the black community, heroin, methamphetamine, LSD, oxycodone, and other drugs as a ballot measure that decriminalized them took effect on Monday. And so as I gave the round of applause, again, we know that this shift from a war on drugs is because white people are being impacted. All you got to do is drive down in Kensington, here in Philadelphia. The amount of people on heroin, on fentanyl, and all those other alls and ons. You know, rightfully so, black folk continue to be outraged and upset. And we're just like, where was this sympathy, this empathy when it was crack that y'all strategically put in the black communities? Where was this war on drugs when Nixon was talking about it? Again, strategically to separate, de-strengthen. That's what I was trying to find a word to say other than de-strengthen, but we're gonna rock with that. To de-strengthen, weaken. There we go. To weaken the black community. Ronald Reagan kept on. Bush kept on. Y'all man's Clinton kept on. I mean, at some point we're gonna have a conversation about these presidents doing their damnedest to weaken the black community. And you're probably thinking about like Clinton. Nah, he was the first black president. Ain't that the joke y'all be saying? He could come to the cookout because he played some weak saxophone on Arsenio Hall. And he smoked, but he didn't inhale. He also signed off on the adoption of the Safe Families Act of 1997, which says that if a child is in foster care for 15 out of 22 months, then the goal becomes adoption, and terminating of parental rights should be the goal. Who's disproportionately represented in foster care? Black and brown folk, black folk in particular. When we talk about drugs and alcohol, what's the length of time that it takes for somebody to get clean? According to my mother, it's 7. My mother, expert in the area. We're talking about 7 times. It's the proverbial rock bottom that we talk about. So if you relapse in 7 times, 15 out of 22 months, your child can be gone. Unless, they're with a family member or, there's some other goals that exist. For every child that's adopted, the state gets $4,000. If it's a special needs child, it's $6,000. It's big business, baby. Y'all man's Clinton was a part of that. But I digress. That's a conversation for another day. So, but back to Oregon. White folk, I mean, people can no longer be arrested for possession of small amounts of the drugs that I reference. Instead, they'll face a $100 fine or a health assessment that could lead to addiction counseling. And so again, this is where it becomes interesting. Right? Because the devil is always in the details as well as in the comment section. I see y'all. who's going to make the determination who gets the $100 fine or who gets the health assessment that could lead to addiction counseling? Do you get both? Are we going to see a whole bunch of people of a certain community getting that $100 fine? And then we see another population getting treatment. I mean, because that's what the standard is now. It's just not the $100 fine. It's you go directly to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200. While others get to go and land on free parking and relax for a bit. Chill. Get their life together. And then come back out and still do the same thing. And so that's going to be an interesting question that comes out of this. Who's going to legislate that? What's the oversight going to look like? I mean, it came, and again, I celebrate this bill because it's a start. We recognize that drug use isn't a criminal a criminal behavior. It's more of a physical and mental, I hate to say issue, that needs to be addressed. A spiritual issue that needs to be addressed. That putting someone in jail, yeah, they might get clean. It's no different than shame, right? You putting them in jail is shaming them. Yeah, it might stop the behavior momentarily, but for all the wrong reasons, it may actually be causing more problems than was anticipated. You know, it was good for them to recognize that decriminalizing possession was important because why? You get locked up, you now have a criminal record. How are you going to find a job? How are you going to get those benefits for treatment? Because Medicaid, you might have maxed out for Medicaid treatments. Or they're just not approving it because you have gone to rehab so many times. Private health insurance makes a difference. Getting a house. People do background checks. Should they be doing a criminal background check for housing? Me, I say no. But who am I to say you don't get to have a say in who resides in your home? I think the most concerning part of this was 24 district attorneys opposed the measure, saying that it was reckless and lead to acceptability of dangerous drugs. I mean, it's the same old fear-mongering tactics that is always used when the world wants to progress. We saw it with schools. Oh my gosh, if you talk about sex with kids, they're going to start having sex. I haven't saw any statistic to bear that out. I think for them the biggest concern was how are we going to justify our jobs? How are we going to justify our positions, our incomes, if we don't have people to prosecute? These are the easiest cases to prosecute. You come in a courtroom before it even makes to the courtroom. Hey, listen, we're gonna offer you a couple years of probation. Plead guilty. Right? Plead guilty, take the deal, do 6 months, do a couple weeks. This still goes on their record. Their success rate. You know, I think we've seen especially with the legalization of marijuana, that, yeah, there's not going to be an increase in crime. That there's not going to be an increase of violence. What we do see is a surplus of money, a surplus of funds, which they plan to use to fund the expansion of treatment facilities. And I have the numbers here. I thought I had the numbers here. All right, yeah, I don't have the numbers here. But it was in the hundreds of millions that they've grossed from legalized marijuana. And so they're going to take the money that they're going to take some of the money that they were giving to schools, which you would think that Philadelphia would be able to get some money given the fact that Keystone Shop is right down there in South Philly collecting a bundle of bread. So then at least they might be able to put some ACs in the window as opposed to these Dollar General box fans. But this surplus that they're going to take from this surplus of money that has come from the legalization of marijuana, which was going to the police, which was going to the courts, which was going to the schools, they're going to take some of that money and put it to good, even better use, which is treatment. And so I don't understand how anybody could be opposed to that. Right? It's like the United States is, I compare the United States to like people who have iPhones. Takes them about 15, 20 years to catch up to us Android folk, the type of hardware that we have. I think iPhone people could do split screens right now. Took y'all a little bit. Can y'all talk on the phone and surf the internet at the same time? I'm not sure. But I make that comparison to say it because we got countries like Portugal, Netherlands, and Switzerland who've already decriminalized possession of small amounts of hard drugs. And a counter to the argument made by these 24 district attorneys, in 2000, Portugal decriminalized drug use, and there was no surge in drug use. They decriminalized drugs, and there was no surge in drug use. The number of drug-related deaths fell, while the number of people treated for drug addiction in the country rose 20% from 2001 to 2008. So we're talking about a rise in treatment. And then it stabilized, which either means clearly there's less people who are attempting to utilize services, or if we're optimistic, that is less people using. I prefer the latter. But again, we still have this antiquated view of individuals who use drugs, this stigma. Here in Philadelphia, they wanted to open up a site for heroin users to be able to come in and get high. I'm not going to compare it to Amsterdam from The Wire, but one can say it's a controlled environment, a safe environment. And the beautiful thing about Amsterdam was we know that the surrounding communities weren't impacted, but the services were able to be centralized. So you can have addiction specialists present. You can have nurses and doctors present. You can have all these social services agencies, human services agencies present in one place, helping a population. But of course, Philadelphia is progressive in a sense where we want gentrification from white folk. We allow that to go down. without an issue, where we can give contracts to to uh, to Drexel University grad students to do vaccinations on the community, only come to find out that they were doing whatever the hell they wanted with the vaccine, including taking it home and giving it to their girlfriends. But God forbid we think outside the box. And again, it's just where we are, right? The pushback comes from individuals who don't want to think critically. The pushback tends to come from individuals who are so used to the the same old, same old. They're not innovative. They're not creative. And so with that, what's happening? Kensington is still Kensington. It's a less controlled Amsterdam. The murder rate is still high, over 500. So what are we doing? Listen, that's all I got, man. Listen, I wanted to talk about Brett Favre, him being a racist. I may save that for next week because once you're a racist, you don't just stop being a racist. We at least got a period of. I mean, he from Mississippi. You know, no shade to the people that's from Mississippi, but white folk from Mississippi, they could be racist for at least a decade, 2 decades after being called out on it. So we got some time to have that conversation. I do want to catch the second half for the Sixers game. Listen, man, I may be back tomorrow night after my statistics class. I wouldn't hold my breath. If not, I will be back on Monday. Peace. And so I had my mic off, and so William comes on and says, "Touch on Favre," and I feel like I don't know how many people here. How many people here? I do want to watch the Sixers, man. Let me see. Um. All right, yeah. I mean, it's simple. So I'll talk about it real quick. So Brett Favre racist. I think we're for those of you who don't know, um, as I switch this frame up. Give me 1 second. Uh, so I got a few minutes left. So Brett Favre, Super Bowl winning quarterback, one of he was a great quarterback. He was a great quarterback, a great white man from from born and raised in Mississippi, and you'll be able to tell from the comments. Played for the Green Bay Packers and also the New York Jets and the Minnesota Vikings, which is also important here to remember. So let me get this out. So Brett Favre, he came out today, and I'm gonna put this picture up of young hair Brett. And if you see the cursor on the screen, ignore that. That's just how it's just going down right now. I mean, you see Brett with Tucker Carlson, and I think once I briefly touch on this story, you'll understand why I found this picture. Why I think it's so telling. It offers you insight just into his thinking or a lack thereof. How he likes to hang around with people. He doesn't mind engaging with people who are oppressive in nature. And so today during an interview, Brett Favre came out and he said in an interview he said that I'm kind of old school. I think you play, you get paid a ton of money to do a certain job, and just do it and let the chips fall where they may. I think we make too much money to voice an opinion, but I'm not saying he's wrong. Again, I think it's a different day and time, and it'll be interesting to see how the organization handles this. And so what he's references is black quarterback, great quarterback. I hate the fact that I got to say black, but it's important in this conversation to highlight that he is a black quarterback. I mean, his name is Deshaun. What else would you expect him to be? I haven't met a white Deshaun ever in my life, and if I do, I'm certain the world is coming to an end, right? But he's talking about Deshaun Watson, who has been done dirty by the Houston Texans year after year after year. They had a white man in charge as a head coach. He was subpar, below subpar as a head coach. They went and gave him more power because that's what happens with white people, in particular white men. You can be subpar at your job, and you can gain even more power, right? Because they'll give you an opportunity to fix it. And so what Bill O'Brien, who is said white man, what he did to fix it was he traded away DeAndre Hopkins, who is a top two wide receiver, arguably number one receiver in the NFL. He gave him away for, I love David Johnson. He won me $1,000 in fantasy football a few years back, but he is now washed up, a bag of balls. He traded DeAndre Hopkins for a bag of balls just because he just didn't like him. He also traded Laramie Tunsil. Traded for Laramie Tunsil from the Miami Dolphins. Gave away 2 first-round picks. He's an average tackle at best. So he gutted the team of talent and said, here, Deshaun, you go ahead. And what did Deshaun do? Deshaun balled out. Because that's what we do. That's what we always do. When we're given lemons, we make lemonade, even though I don't know if I necessarily always like that analogy. And so, with that being said, here we come to this year. Bill O'Brien gets fired. Romeo Crennel is now the head coach. And Deshaun plays out of his mind. However, the team is still awful. The team tells him, like so many other black folk, listen, we're going to get your input in our decision making. The Houston Texans went out and hired a firm, right? The Houston Texans went out and hired a firm to find a general manager, and they came back with 2 names, 2 people of color, 2 persons of color, excuse me. One being ESPN's Louis Riddick, and another gentleman. They ignored the recommendation and went out and got Nick Caserio from New England. Deshaun Watson had no input at all. And so what did he say? He said, listen, I'm tired of this. I'm fed up. I'm cool. Yeah, y'all could get up. Y'all go ahead and get me up out the paint. The Houston Texans went and hired a black head coach, David Culley. 62 years of age. Again, last week I talked about the coaching problem in the NFL. Problem is an understatement. David Culley gets his first job at 62. Meanwhile, the Eagles' Nick Sirianni is in his 30s. So we have to highlight that, right? And David Culley said, listen, he going to take it because why wouldn't he take it? With Deshaun, he said, listen, I want Deshaun here, but it comes out today. He said, all right, if he's not here, he's not here. Because he's going to get the bag. It's not going to be an amazing bag that David Culley gets. Why? Because he's 62 years of age. And the Houston Texans are the Houston Texans. But he still get the cash out. So I don't hold him accountable at all. And so with Deshaun Watson recognizing, listen, I'm a powerful athlete. I have the leverage. You have no leverage. I do not have to play. Now, he hasn't said he's not going to play. But if you demand a trade and you have the type of cachet that he has, why would you? even though you just signed an extension last year for hundreds of millions of dollars. And so Brett Favre, again, and it's you never comment on other people's money, other people's situation, unsolicited, right? And so for him to come out and say, "Well, I'm kind of old school," I think we make too much money to voice an opinion. But I'm not saying he's wrong. Like Nas said, well, it's not Nas. I think Jay Z said it. Yeah, Jay Z said it. Is it Uchiwali or is it One Mike? Is it Black Girl Laws or is it Shorty You Owe Me for Ice? So is he wrong or is he right? Should he shut up and dribble or should he maximize the leverage that he has? And so when we talk about the racist aspect of it, right? It's this idea that for white men and white persons, it's the you don't get to do what I can do. For those who don't remember, Brett Favre retired in 2008 because he didn't want to play for the Packers anymore. So he ended up retiring, threatening retirement, got traded to the New York Jets for 1 year, got out of that, and then he went to Minnesota for his final 2 years. And so again, it's the oppressor saying, nah, you don't get to do what we could do. It's not the same. Even though he have more reason. Because his talent is being wasted. He's in the prime. Brett Favre wasn't in the prime of his career at that point. And so I think now where we are is we continue to put mics in front of people's faces and ask them questions. And they put them foot in their mouths. They show us who they are so we can believe them. And we should believe them. This who Brett Favre is. He's the same person that stole what, $1.1 million from TANF, temporary assistance for needy families in Mississippi, for unfulfilled engagements back early last year. He had to end up paying the money back. But again, for white folk, listen, I just didn't know. Again, it's that white privilege. It's the same white privilege that got that little white lady who owned a flower shop or whatever she owns in Texas. The reason she gets to go on a work-related vacation to Mexico, even though she admitted that she stormed the Capitol with the rest of the rebels, with the rest of the white supremacists. Meanwhile, you got black folk who participated in that and they can't get out of jail. I mean, I ain't gonna hit them with the Fred Sanford, you big dummy. But I'm not gonna hit you with the Fred Sanford, you big dummy. And so at this stage of the game, man, we got to shut people like Brett Favre, shut their mic off. But the fact that everybody has an ability, everybody has a platform, that's the reason why y'all here. Everybody has the opportunity to speak their mind, but we have to be mindful of and we have to look at the obvious signs of what people are saying and the implications for what people are saying. And Brett Favre said to Deshaun Watson, shut up and play, nigga. All right, I'm out in these streets, man. Y'all